Iwori on the right, Otura on the left. And IworiOtura has come to us in the wake of Oturupo Ogunda. Right, Oturupo Ogunda was our previous Odu. And when I was reflecting on the flow, the logic, and the continuity between the two, I was very struck by the way in which this, particularly the featured verse of IworiOtura, reinforces the message of our featured verse of Oturupo Ogunda. And so if you remember in Oturupo Ogunda, the featured verse was where Olokun was suffering from some unknown or undisclosed problem or ailment. And Olokun summoned three babalawo. And Alara, Ajero, and the Orunmila, which really stood out for me because I'm used to them being referenced as kings. But when Baba Araba told the story, they were referred to as babalawo. And then I thought about it more, and it's like, oh, actually that is consistent with, what we know from Iwori Meji, that Alara, as well as Ajero and Orunmila, they were sons of Orunmila. And so it does stand to reason that they would also be babalawo. Anyway, Olokun summons them, and when they come to Olokun, everyone knows that Olokun is super rich. And of course, when you go to treat someone who is super rich, then you're looking at charging premium prices. And whereas the first two asked for the moon and the stars as far as their fees, Orunmila was instructed before he left to not overcharge. Ifa told Orunmila to only ask for what Ifa asked. Only charge what Ifa asked, no more. And so when Orunmila prescribed the sacrifice, he was, sticking to the books. And when it came to the fees that he would charge, it was strictly by the books. And Orunmila's pronouncements and his predictions were exactly what addressed Olokun's problem. And then when they made the sacrifice, those were the sacrifices that finally made Olokun's prayers manifest. And then Olokun compensated Orunmila handsomely for being able to solve his problem. And so when I was reflecting on that, I was reminded of a conversation that actually I was having with Orikoku about her work in her business, and when you're an entrepreneur, it's natural that you think about getting a job at different points, right? Because the consistency of the money, or I should say really it's the inconsistency of the money is maddening, and the just the stress of being the janitor and the CPA and the computer guy and the driver and the delivery boy and you know what I'm saying? Like, you're everything and you're always everything, and it just never stops. And at many points in your career as an entrepreneur, you will ask yourself, is it time for me just to go and get a job at the post office? And so that was part of the conversation that Orikoku and I were having, and it dawned on me something that I learned in my own journey, which was the fact that, you probably have some premium clients though. You know, there's probably a handful of people who you have served over the years who really have the means to compensate you very well, but you haven't asked them for any more money, and you haven't offered them anything that is exclusive or elite, or what they call premium. And when I think about this particular verse, in relationship to that conversation, something that we all need to know as entrepreneurs, especially, but also just as problem solvers who want to be entrepreneurial in our approach to life. The best way for you to make more money is to solve rich people's problems. You need to solve the expensive problems for people who can pay for them. You need to solve the expensive problems for people who can pay for them, right? And in a very real way, that is what has, from a market standpoint, that's what has enabled us to be able to practice the Orisha tradition as robustly as we are right now. People who've been around since, let's say, from the 80s will know that the Cubans practice Orisha with Cubans. That was the way they had done it for decades, right? When they folks started coming over in the 50s, and they spread out in little different places here and there, 60s, 70s, most of kind of started into the 80s, started to shift up, change a little bit, but it was for them. And if you know people who were around in that time, if you knew African Americans who were around in the 70s, they'll tell you, man, the Cubans they weren't interested in you. They weren't offering anything to you, because it wasn't a commercial endeavor. What they were doing was providing the glue for their society as Cubans. This is a part of our social construct, right? But then the introduction of Colombian drug money, Mexican cartel money, that changed the economic framework amongst the Cubans. So they started solving, rich people's problems. And then they started charging rich people prices to do so. But that is what opened the door. Quite honestly, that's what financed the botanicas and stuff like that you and I would just stumble into by chance, because now it started to take on a more of a public face, right? Likewise, amongst the Nigerians, if you were around in the 80s, if you were around in the early 90s, there were babalawos who were coming from Nigeria. They were coming, but they weren't talking to you. They were not concerned with you. They were amongst Nigerians. And if you went there, they would carry out whatever they were doing, and it would be 100% in Yoruba, and there wasn't anybody translating anything for any reason at all whatsoever. This is for us. This is something that is again part of our social psychology, and we're solving our problems in an insular fashion. But then the presence of the opportunity to match what the Cubans were doing, right? When you realize, oh, these guys are doing this I'm doing this for $300 for my kinsman, but these guys are doing the same thing for $3,000. They're doing it for $30,000. So it introduced a layer of commercialism into the practice. But it is precisely because of that that it began to spread to the point that it has spread today. And so the reason why I'm saying all that is because the reality is that it makes sense. It makes sense from the standpoint of effort and exertion for everyone who is either an entrepreneur or who is entrepreneurial in their approach to things. You've got to figure out the way to make the most money doing what you do. You can't be grinding for pennies forever. It's cool when you're in your 20s because you got strong shoulders and you're idealistic. By the time you start getting into your 30s, maybe it's waning a little bit because your obligations are changing. By the time you get into your 40s, though, no. My pro bono days are over. My, getting it out of the mud days, those are over. I need to start planning. I need to start anticipating. I need to start investing. Okay? And so the best way to do that is to set yourself up with some percentage of your income that is going to be premium. Okay? And that is one of the underlying principles that I took out of that the verse of Oturupon Ogunda. But that principle, if you've already started to look at IworiOtura, you can see how the same idea continues in IworiOtura. So let's get into it and dissect how this lesson it continues to flourish for us, and let's look at the specific ways in which IworiOtura is setting us up to understand and appreciate what it means to earn a fair wage for what we do, and be able to be specific and strategic and deliberate about whose problems we solve, how we solve them, and what we need in exchange for solving certain people's problems. Right? I don't mind solving poor people's problems, but I need certain things from poor people for solving their problems. And likewise, I don't mind solving rich people's problems, but I need something different from rich people when I solve their problems. It's a different economy. I hope y'all understand what I'm saying. It's a different economy, and you got to know which side of the economy you're working in so that you are negotiating properly for according to who you're talking to and what you really need. All right. So our Odu is IworiOtura. That's the Odu that came for us, in case y'all hadn't got that. I know most of us are veterans, but I see a couple of new faces in here, so I don't want to be going too fast. Iwori on the right, Otura on the left. That's the Odu that has come for us in this Itadogun cycle. The orientation of the Odu is Ire, which is positive. The Odu could be Ire, it could be Ayewo, right? Because Ifa speaks, we look at it all as positive because it prepares us to be able to respond. But the message could be positive and it could be negative. It could be Ire or it could be Ayewo. In this case, it's Ire, which is blessing. It's positive, it's favorable. The way that blessing manifests is with cool money. Okay, cool money. And it's important to make the distinction between cool money and hot money. Cool money is money that just brings blessings. It doesn't bring strife. Hot money brings strife. Hot money brings conflict. Hot money brings confusion. Hot money is, more money, more problems, right? But in this case, we got cool money. So it's just money that comes and we're able to enjoy everything that comes with it. And Ifa says that in order for us to secure this cool money, we need to make sacrifice. There is no Adimu. There are no other deities that we need to cling to. We just need to make the sacrifice. But as you go through the verses and you see different deities show up, and it may be a verse that pertains to you, then by all means, let us know, because in that instance, it may also require that you would do the equivalent of an adimu, right? If a particular verse pertains to you because of your situation, then we would make special sacrifices for that orisha to ensure that you get the support that you need. And IworiOtura has with it some observances, and I must say that I do not remember what our observances are. Let's see here. Give me 1 second. IworiOtura. IworiOtura. Where are what were our observances? Well, let me see. Well, I get that. I know our symbol. Our symbol is a not very frequently seen symbol, but one of my favorites, which is wekeno. Wekeno is the white circle with a red square in the middle, or we could say a red square with a white circle surrounding it. And that red square, which is something that they'll go into much more details on Thursday during Dream Incubation, but wekeno is the symbol that represents, for me, I call it the graduation symbol. And not just graduation, but it's like graduation from elementary school. Going from first grade to second grade, it's incremental. From third grade to fourth grade, from fifth grade to sixth grade. But when you go from sixth grade to seventh grade, now you're changing classes. You probably are going to change the whole school, right? Elementary school is more than likely going to be in the same location, but when you get to middle school, you get to junior high school, you're going to a different location. You got all new teachers, and it's just like an unspoken rule that once you finish elementary school, you can't come back here anymore. Your work here is done. You've saturated everything that the school has to offer. You kickball. When you play kickball, you can kick it over the fence or onto the roof of the school. You can dunk on the on the basketball courts. Like, all the academic work, you've mastered the multiplication tables. You can spell all the words. Like, anything that there is to be done at the elementary school level, you've done it. There's no business for you to be back at this place. That's, to me, wekeno. Wekeno says you're out of here, right? And so this and we see in our featured verse, that theme is punctuated by the intensity and the severity of the sequence of events. That the situation was no longer bearable. And that's a very good time in your life. If you are in any aspect of your life, if you are sitting and you're pacing back and forth, or you're looking yourself in the mirror, or you're looking at the people around you, or you're looking at the clothes you're wearing, the car you're driving, or anything you're looking at, you just saying to yourself, nah, this is dead. That's Wekeno. This cannot continue anymore. If you maybe you're looking at your health, maybe you got some kind of an addiction, whatever the case may be, wherever you feel that sense of just resolute conviction, this chapter is over. That is what Wekeno is speaking to. Don't try to deny it. Don't try to rationalize it. Don't try to minimize it. Don't try to talk yourself out of it. Sometimes you need to just accept that it is time to move up and move on. Now, that doesn't mean you pack all your stuff into a little backpack and just start walking down the street in the middle of the night, but it means that you need to come to grips with the fact that everything's come to an end. This is one of my great favorite salsa songs. Todo tiene su final. Da, 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 da. Nada dura para siempre. Tenemos que recordar que no existe eternidad. Everything has an end. Nothing goes on forever. We have to remember that eternity doesn't exist. Everything, there's a season for everything, ladies and gentlemen. And the best favor you can do for yourself is recognize when a season has come to its end. And then you start moving accordingly, right? Moving accordingly so you can get what is truly due to you. And so Wekeno is really hammering that home for us. And I got to look at the observances, and there was a reason why I couldn't remember the observances, because Ifa didn't give us any observances. So just take the advisories, right? As I was saying before, as you go down the list of verses and you see something that really pertains to you, those advisories are what you need to follow. Okay, keep those advisories, keep those advisories, keep those advisories. But as far as strict taboos or observances for all of us, if I did not ask for any observances. So the theme of this particular verse is one of my also all-time favorite themes from the world of business and also consulting, which is the 80-20 rule. You guys familiar with the 80-20 rule? It's also called the Pareto rule. Pareto was a physicist or something like that. He's some kind of a scientist, but basically he told the world that 80% of the output comes from 20% of the input. 80% of the output comes from 20% of the input. And the way that ties into the previous message around, the best way to get wealthy is by solving rich people's problems, is that from a business standpoint, if you got clients, then you're going to know that 80% of your income comes from 20% of your clients. 80% of your income comes from 20% of your clients. And I was introduced to the Pareto rule through a guy named Tim Ferriss. If you guys ever read Tim Ferriss, he gave us the 20-hour work week. He gave us the 20-hour work week, the 4-hour body, he came up with all these real concise ways to do things. He has another concept called MED. MED is minimum exertion something. I've forgotten what the D is for, but it basically is what we would get from Oyekumeji: little work and plenty money. The least amount of effort that you need to put forward to get the maximum output. Being very, very precise and strategic about where you target your time. So from a consultant standpoint, if you got a lot of clients and you're having to deal with a lot of people, you would identify the 20% of your clients who pay in full, who pay on time, who pay every time. And you're going to find that those clients are also the ones who complain the least. They have the least, they follow the instructions the best, and they get the best outcomes. So a lot of times when you hear me talk in general, when I make, over the years, and I make videos and I say, do this and do this and do that, that is based on my observation of my best clients. My most successful clients who I watch over the years, I say, why does this guy succeed and that guy doesn't? I castify for this guy and this guy in the same day. I made elbow for this guy and this guy in the same day. Why is this guy progressing and this guy going backwards? Why is this guy coming back to me singing praises of Ifa and this guy is always disgruntled? Well, it's because this guy also pays in full, on time, every time, follows instructions, and he gets results. This guy always has got some reason why he don't have it together and why I didn't tell him all it's always some reason why his package isn't together, right? The guy who gives you, who's giving you the hardest trouble, you delegate him. You assign him to someone else. You work with the guy who is paying you in full, on time, every time, and following instructions. That's where you put your energy. That's where you give your attention. Because that's the guy who's going to get you the results. And is not going to take years of your life from you in the process of you trying to help him solve his problem. That is the 80-20 rule in effect. That's the Pareto law, the Pareto rule. It also tells you that the 20%, the reverse is also true, that 80% of your problems are coming from 20% of your people. So you got to also be observant of that. And you got to be careful not to get drawn into a lot of, unnecessary things with people who, they're just going to suck the life out of you, right? And the reason why I'm driving this home is because I don't know what you all do for a living, but this is like the fourth, fifth wave of my career, right? I spent the overwhelming majority of my career as a teacher, right? I have willingly slaved from my community. I've loved every second of it. School teachers, like, I'll give my kids my lunch. I'll use my money to buy my kids pencils. You know what I'm saying? Like that I'm a teacher, right? But when I look back, and the attitude of a teacher should be that, right? But that's not the world. That's not the world. The world is, if you don't have it together, you're gonna get left. If you're not ready to perform, if you're not ready to meet the standard in the world, you're gonna get left. No one's going to buy your pencil for you. No one's going to buy your lunch for you in the world. So you got to be scrappy and you got to get it. And so that's a hard reality to say, and it's not something that I probably will ever be comfortable with, but I know it's the reality. I know it's the reality, and so I don't want to do you the disservice by perpetuating the idea that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay unless you make it okay. And you can't make it okay unless you understand the game and you're willing to play the game on the terms that will allow you to win. You're not just playing the game to say that you got a jersey. You got to play to win. We got to play to win. And we got to recognize one another who are playing to win. I see you. You over there, you playing to win. Yeah, I want you on my team. Oh, I see you over there. You playing to win. I want you on my team. I see you over there. You playing to win. I want you on my team. That is, in large part, the driving spirit of the School of Orisa Studies. The reason why you're here, the reason why you stay more than a day, right, is because there's something else going on in your life that you like the momentum. There's some other aspect of your character and your personality and your ambition and your aspirations that you say, hey, you know what? This is not no easy peasy thing. I thought this was just going to be a Facebook group. Nah, I got to kind of do stuff. I got to kind of think about stuff. Nah, I got to kind of show up. Yeah. Because the other thing is that, you know, A-level players like to play with other A-level players. A-level players don't want to be with C-level players. It's a whole different value system. It's a whole different value system. And I know this is like, you know what I mean? It grates against us, you know what I'm saying, as a people, because we know where we come from. We know what we need. And there's a part of us that kind of feels like it's a little bit derogatory to speak in competitive terms. But we're in a competitive environment, and we have to be able to compete with the best of the best. And that doesn't mean that we're going to be just trampling our own people, but we've got to be ready, willing, and able to keep locking shoulders with the best of one another, so that we can go and bang with the best of on the other side, because the other ones are banging. Like you'll hear me frequently, listen, your Filipino equivalents, because there's Filipinos who's going back to the original. They're banging. The Mexicans who's going back to the original Mexican, who's doing their Mexican divination, they banging. The Hawaiians who's going back to the original Hawaiian indigenous system, they banging. The Koreans, the Japanese, you name it. It's everywhere, all over the world. What we're experiencing right here, everybody all over the world is being swept up in the same consciousness. The Celtics, the Gaelics, the Druids, all of that is a resurgence of indigenous knowledge all over the world. But they're all competing. They're all comfortable competing. We need to be comfortable competing, applying these rules. This 80-20 rule is for you. You got to be able to recognize and lock up with the other people who are ready to move and do and achieve at the highest level. Okay, so how does this look in this verse of IworiOtura? Let's break it down. I'm gonna refer back to my notes because I haven't been behind the chair in a minute, so I can see the time is gonna get away from me, and you're gonna be rolling your eyes, be like, man, it's like 10 o'clock, and you need to get to the point already. So let me cut to the chase. Where are we? This tradition that we practice, Orisha lifestyle, it puts a lot of emphasis on behavior, but not just behavior in a vacuum. It's not like we don't have the 10 Commandments mentality. Orisha lifestyle puts a lot of emphasis on your ability to read a situation and to respond accordingly. You need to be able to have the kind of behavior that matches the situation. Not that you're matching energy, but you're able to address the situation as it crops up, right? Whatever the imperatives of reality demand is what you're going to be ready, willing, and able to demonstrate. And of course, just coming back from Nigeria, that's woven into the culture so deep that it is no surprise that this is a core tenet of the Orisha tradition. You got to be ready, willing, and able to do what's necessary, basically. And your willingness to do is what makes your sacrifice ultimately manifest. It's your willingness to participate. It's your readiness to be engaged that activates your sacrifice. You cannot be a passive observer, in other words. It's not a tradition that's based on concepts and ideas. It's based upon principles and actions. Okay? And so today, one of the things that I want to do is I want to bring to your attention that you have to have the presence of mind to recognize when Ifa is revealing your opportunity to act. Your mind has to be, in your heart, has to be open and receptive to, this is my moment. You got to recognize the moment. All right. Secondly, I want to bring home the importance of our gratitude to Orunmila for preparing us for the moment. Orunmila predicts and anticipates the moment. Orunmila allows us to do the scenario mapping to anticipate the moment so that we've already rehearsed it mentally. We've already rehearsed it emotionally, so that when we get the cues, we already know those pathways into ourselves to respond with conviction. And the third thing that I want to do is I want to make you acutely aware of the opportunities that surround you right this very moment. I want that by the time we finish this conversation for you to be more attuned to the opportunities that are happening right in front of you. They're all around you. There's some kind of romantic opportunity. There's some kind of financial opportunity. There's some kind of a health opportunity. There's some kind of a political opportunity. There's some kind of an opportunity in the development of your destiny. There's some opportunity that is waiting for you to act, for you to recognize it and seize the moment. I want you to acknowledge it. I want you to know it by this evening. That's my hope and my prayer. If everything goes as it should, I want you to be acutely aware of that and poised to go into action on behalf of your own destiny. So IworiOtura provides for us a nice pathway toward that kind of a realization. What happens? The verse begins with a variation on the triangulation effect. Usually when they talk about the triangulation effect is usually kind of in strategy. In strategy, they talk about the triangulation effect in a negative way, where you and I are in a headlock, right? We're trapped in some kind of a back and forth debate. I'm not budging, you're not budging. But I'm going to invite Lavelle into the conversation because I know Lavelle is going to agree with me. So now me and Lavelle going to team up on you. That's the triangulation effect in a negative manipulation, right? That's typically how they describe it. But the triangulation effect also has a virtuous aspect as well, in the sense that what we see in this particular verse, where you got two characters. You got Abiba King and you got Elukbona. Now, these two are in the same town. They're in the same town. But they are the solution to one another's problem. But for whatever reason, they're polarized. They're not able to cross. They're not able to meet. They need that third factor that will bring them together. And that's where Orunmila comes in. So Abibaken is a successful or a proficient babalawo, but he's broke. And Elukpona is a wealthy aristocrat with 200 wives, 200 slaves, an estate, animals. You know, he's got it all. But he doesn't have an heir, which means he doesn't have a future. And the two of them are suffering in isolation. Enters Orunmila. Orunmila then goes and casts Ifa for Abibakin, his fellow babalawo, and he recognizes, my brother, I see that you have some real severe financial constraints. The remedy to your problem is that you're going to need to sell yourself into slavery and make a sacrifice. On the other end, Orunmila goes and consults with Elukpona, and he tells Elukpona, I see that the problem is that you don't have a future. You need to make sacrifice and you need to acquire another slave. And that is what is going to save you from being truncated. And so the interesting thing about the solution for each of them is more of the same. Abibakin is already poor, but the solution for him is to go further into now servitude. And Olukpona has an abundance. He got 200 slaves, but now he's gonna indulge even more. He's gonna do more of the same. He's gonna get another. And so it's like the energetically, it's more of the same. Doing the thing that is like what you already have is going to create now a different result. But it's only going to create a different result because you're going to do it in this triangulation. If you continue to do what you've been doing where you are in the way that you've done it, you're going to get the same results. But if you do the same thing somewhere else, then you get a whole different set of results. This is something that a friend of mine used to laugh about all the time. It's like you could be playing music on a corner. This is the famous violinist, right? Who was going to play in the New York Philharmonic or something like that. And the day before, he stands in the subway and plays the whole concert in the subway. And people maybe drop $20 in his violin case. The next day, the guy is going to play for heads of state and, you know, who knows whoever else in the most prestigious hall in New York, right? Same thing in a different place, totally different result. So sometimes you're going to be doing the same thing that you have been doing before, but you're going to have to do it in a different place, right? Just because you're moving up and moving on doesn't mean that you're discarding everything that you used to do. You're just doing it in a place where it's going to be well received, right? Like I was saying before, you could be solving poor people's problem, you could be solving rich people's problem. The work is the same. The mental effort is the same. It's just where you're doing it is what changes the outcome. Abibakin had been solving people's problems nonstop, but it just weren't the people who were going to help him solve his problem. Elukpona had multiple servants at his disposal, but they just weren't the ones who could solve his real problem. Ifa says that you have the solution at hand. There's something right in front of you. There's something in arm's reach. You just need to pivot. You need to change your perspective. You need to put a different lens or a different filter on how you're seeing your environment and how you're seeing yourself. Because the same thing you're doing over here, you could do it over there and create a whole new reality for yourself. Right? So Abibakin, the babalawo, follows Orunmila's advice. He makes the sacrifice. He gets his ponri, his ishefa, his hand of ifa. He ties it to his waist, and he goes down to the market, and he sits down in the place where slaves were sold. Likewise, Elupona goes and he has his, his entourage prepare the carriage or whatever it was that took him down there. Let's say it's in modern times. They got into the Range Rover and they drove down to the market to where slaves were bought. And he saw Abibaken. He says, "Hey, I'm looking for a slave." He said, "Yep, I got one. How much?" They named the number. He gave him the number. He said, "Where's the slave? I'm him." He took him home. Elupona had the other slaves give Abibaken his quarters. Next day, he goes to work. But, he's been a babalawo and he doesn't know how to use the tools. He doesn't know how to chop. He doesn't, But while he's fumbling and stumbling with his work, the other slaves see that he has this bundle tied around his waist. And so they ask him, "Well, what is that?" And he tells them what it is, and he's probably quite eloquent as he starts to talk about Ifa. Y'all have that experience where you start talking to people about Ifa, about Orisha, and their eyes glaze over, and they're not really grasping anything that you're talking about. That was the case with our good Abibaken, but it was worse for him because he was a slave. So they say, "Yeah, that we don't do that here." They took his Ifa, poof, threw it in the pond. So now this guy has gone from being a poor babalawo to selling himself into slavery, to having the other slaves jack him for his ikin and throw him in the pond. Talk about going from bad to worse. But that's the nature of graduation, though. It looks and feels like an ordeal, and it's not for the faint at heart. But Abibaken wasn't faint at heart. When they took his ikin, he immediately started looking for something else that he could do, and he found another tree that made some seed that looked like Ifa. And so he gathered up 16 of them, and he sat there on the ground, and he cast the Ifa, and it was his own Odu that came down. Ifa was speaking to him. Ifa was affirming for him, "You're in the right place. This is the right time. You're doing the right thing." And let me give you a secret. This guy that you're working for has a problem that you can solve. He doesn't have any children. That's his problem. Abibaken is so excited, he calls the other slaves over. And he tells them, "You guys are not going to believe this. Our master doesn't have any children. He doesn't have an heir." And that was the last straw. That was the last straw. The slaves just could not accept that kind of bad talk about their master. "How dare you, you lowly slave, talk about what our master has and does not have. Tie him up." They tied his hands, they tied his feet, they took him back to the house of Olokun, and they said, "Master, this insolent, insubordinate, disrespectful slave said that you don't have an heir." Olukun was outraged. He said, "What? Thank you for bringing him to me. I'm going to make sure he gets exactly the kind of punishment he deserves. I'm going to sacrifice him to Ogun in due time. Go and tie him up outside my apartment." Once they tied him up and left, Olukun made sure the coast was clear, and then he went and he untied Abibaken. He says, "Tell me, how did you know that I don't have any children? That's my biggest concern. That's my biggest problem. How did you know?" Again, Abibaken goes on to explain. "I had my Ifa, they took it away. I cast Ifa using these other seeds, the Odu that came. This is what the message is. And that's how I knew." Olukun says, "Well, can you solve that problem for me?" And he says, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I can." Now, Olukun has heard everything that he needs to hear. He devises a ruse. He has the slaves go and get fresh palm fronds tied around the Ogun shrine. He got a rooster. He sacrificed the rooster and poured the blood all over the Ogun shrine to make it look like that Abibaken had been sacrificed there. Then he had the tailor go make a beautiful, immaculate white gown. And then he invited everybody back and introduced Abibaken as actually himself, a proficient Ifa priest. The slaves didn't even recognize him. He had a nice cut. He was all shaved up. He was beautifully dressed. They didn't even recognize him as the one that they were trying to have executed. In due time, Olukona's wives started to give birth to children. Olukona was so pleased with Abibakin's work that he enriched him greatly and then started to take him around to other wealthy people in the area. And he solved their problems. They started to do other endeavors. The two of them began to prosper together. They started to compare notes and talk to one another about how they had met and how things had turned out the way they had. And they realized that it was Orunmila who had introduced them through telling them how to solve their problems. And so then they created a little care package and they sent it to Orunmila out of gratitude to say thank you for cloaking us in the wisdom that would allow us to solve one another's problems and then go on and solve the problems of so many others. And so Otura Iwori has for us a strong affirmation of our ability to be the solution that the world is desperately seeking. And in being the solution for the world, we are able to then solve our own problems. By being the solution for others, we inadvertently become the solution to our own problems as well. But in order to do so, we've got to be able to number one, recognize what it is that we do, what it is that we bring, and we got to be willing to respond and do what we do wherever is needed. We don't get to necessarily choose that we're only going to do it here and we're never going to do it there. And we're only going to do it like this. We can't stay within our comfort zone and be transformed at the same time, is what I want to say. We can't stay within what's familiar to us and reach the pinnacle of our potential at the same time. We've got to be willing to take those chances, to step out, to do things in places that we hadn't done them before. And the last thing that I want to say about this particular lesson is that the way you think and what you think about will train your mind. It will condition your mind. And what I mean by that is, if you insist on focusing on certain things, it will disallow your mind from being able to see things in a certain way. If you insist on focusing on certain things, it will prevent your mind from being able to see things in a certain way. And if you can't see things from different perspectives, from different angles, if you can't envision things in a different way, then it will continually be, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. You must cultivate a willingness to see yourself in a different way. You have to cultivate enough courage to turn yourself away from things that you're used to looking at, to look at other things, to listen to other things, to explore other things, not just for the sake of exploration, but for the purpose of reconditioning your mind, rewiring your thought processes, challenging your assumptions, forcing yourself out of your comfort zone. this is essential to your ability to be able to see yourself brand new, recognize your opportunities as they really are, and then respond according to what the situation needs and what you need in the situation. So let me pause there. Let me pause there and ask you what this Ifa means to you. What is Ifa telling you right now? What is Ifa telling you right now? What is this message of IworiOtura conveying to you in this moment about your life, about your circumstances, about your condition? What is Ifa telling you?